Well, the institution, it was instituted by Christ, but that doesn't mean that it can't be flawed. And there's a school of thought that says it isn't what it purports to be anymore.
In the early days of Christianity, while powerful men in the West were busy holding political councils to decide exactly which ancient books to keep and which to throw away, the isolated nation of Ethiopia simply kept absolutely everything.
This is a rare Ethiopian Orthodox Bible manuscript, handwritten in Ethiopia's sacred liturgical language.
That is the massive, world-changing reality that most modern churchgoers absolutely never learn. Back in the 4th century, small councils of powerful men sat in closed, echoing rooms and literally voted on which ancient texts were considered divinely inspired by God. The specific books that won those political votes were bound together and eventually became the standard Western Bible sitting on your shelf today. But the books that lost those votes were immediately labeled as highly dangerous. They were aggressively pulled from public circulation, actively hunted down, and in many cases, physically destroyed and burned to ash. Modern Western Bibles contain exactly 66 to 73 books. For centuries, most ordinary people blindly assumed that those books represented the entire, complete story of the Christian faith. But it wasn't the whole story. It wasn't even close. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church stands today as one of the absolute oldest Christian institutions on earth. Crucially, they absolutely never participated in those Roman voting councils. Christianity actually arrived in the nation of Ethiopia long before it ever arrived in most parts of Europe. These were not latecomers to the faith. These were among the very first human beings on the planet to actively call themselves followers of Christ. Because the nation of Ethiopia is geographically surrounded by towering, impassable mountain ranges and vast, scorching deserts, it was nearly physically impossible for the rest of the world to reach them for most of recorded human history. Because of this extreme geographic isolation, the Ethiopian church developed entirely on its own, completely cut off and isolated from the shifting, power-hungry politics that were actively reshaping the Christian religion in the Roman Empire. So here's the incredible result of that deep isolation. While Roman councils were hotly debating which specific gospels to keep and which to burn, devout Ethiopian monks were quietly and meticulously copying every single text that had been originally circulating among the earliest believers. They copied every single gospel, every terrifying apocalyptic vision, and every ancient account of the life of Christ. They didn't arrogantly pick and choose what fit a specific political narrative. They simply preserved the entire ancient record. The staggering result of their dedication is an Ethiopian biblical canon containing exactly 81 books, 46 books in the Old Testament, and 35 books in the New Testament. All of these texts were preserved in Ge'ez, an ancient Semitic language that is significantly older than Latin and older than Greek as a liturgical tongue. Securely hidden among those 81 books are massive world-changing texts that were completely and permanently erased from Western Christianity entirely. Texts like the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, the Ascension of Isaiah, and the deeply controversial Book of the Covenant. Dr. Ephraim Isaac, a scholar at Princeton University considered one of the foremost global experts on Ge'ez literature, spent over 40 years of his life painstakingly working with these specific ancient manuscripts. He famously stated that the very first time he placed the Ethiopian biblical canon side by side with the standard Western Bible, he felt exactly like he had been reading a massive book with half of the chapters violently ripped out his entire life. These erased texts are not just minor historical footnotes or weird curiosities. They are entire theological frameworks that managed to survive in only one highly guarded place on Earth. But the sheer number of books they preserved is not even the part that made Hollywood director Mel Gibson go completely silent when he heard them. It is exactly what those erased books say about the cosmic nature of Jesus Christ. If you grew up anywhere in the Western world, you carry a very specific, deeply ingrained image of Jesus in your mind. You picture a man with soft eyes, a perfectly calm face, wearing a flowing robe with light skin, light hair, and a constantly gentle, passive expression. That specific image was actively painted into existence during the European Renaissance. European artists deliberately made Jesus look exactly like the ordinary people living around them. They designed him to be highly approachable, deeply familiar, and above all else, entirely safe. Now, completely forget that image. Erase every single bit of it from your mind, because the ancient Ethiopian manuscripts describe something else entirely, and it is absolutely not subtle. According to these texts, His hair literally radiates intense light, looking like pure wool that has been violently struck by the blinding rays of the sun. It is not described as a simple hair color. It is described as a physical material that is intensely luminous, physically alive, and constantly glowing. His eyes are described as blazing like pure fire that has been impossibly imprisoned inside clear crystal. Those eyes do not offer soft, warm comfort. They offer total, terrifying transparency. The texts describe these as eyes that immediately see through absolutely everything. They see through human pretense, through all of our daily lies, and straight through every single defensive wall you have ever built around the dark parts of yourself that you absolutely do not want examined. His face is explicitly described as being brighter than 1,000 suns burning all at once. It is a cosmic radiance so unimaginably intense that the texts explicitly state that even the highest, most powerful angels in the heavens actively struggle to look directly at it without turning away. Yet amidst all of this terrifying cosmic power, there is a profound peace. But the text notes that this peace is completely beyond human comprehension. He is not peaceful because the overwhelming power is absent. He is completely calm because his power is so absolute that he simply has nothing to prove. It is the terrifying calm of a cosmic being that could effortlessly unmake the entire universe with a thought and simply chooses not to do so. When he speaks, the sound of his voice does not simply travel through the air like a normal human vocal cord. It physically ripples across different dimensions. The layers of reality that human beings do not normally perceive literally vibrate and shake with every single word he utters. When he physically moves, the very fabric of the physical world itself actively responds to him, bending and shifting around his body exactly like still water being disturbed by a thrown stone. Even his total silence carries a massive, crushing physical weight. The ancient texts describe his mere physical presence as something that actively reshapes the physical space around it, as if reality itself instantly recognizes what it is in the presence of and immediately rearranges itself accordingly. Here is the most terrifying catch. The Ethiopian texts are absolutely not being poetic. The ancient authors were not using clever metaphors for dramatic effect. They are actively describing in the absolute most literal terms their ancient language would allow. A cosmic being so incredibly far beyond normal human biology that the very word human barely even applies. Dr. Getachri Haley, a brilliant scholar who spent over 3 decades cataloging these exact Ethiopian manuscripts at the Hill Museum, deeply understood this. He described the visceral experience of reading these ancient passages for the very first time as being terrifying and beautiful in perfectly equal measure. He stated plainly, "This is not the Jesus of Sunday school. This is something the Western Church either completely forgot or deliberately chose to forget." If you know your standard Bible, these terrifying Ethiopian descriptions actually match the book of Revelation almost exactly. The feet shining like polished bronze pulled fresh from a blazing furnace. The massive voice sounding like the deafening roar of a massive waterfall. The face shining violently like the sun operating at full power. All of those cosmic images actively appear in the very last book of the standard Western Bible. Revelation is the one single book that somehow managed to survive the brutal Roman editorial process with its terrifying cosmic imagery left completely intact. But in the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, that cosmic description is absolutely not the exception. That is the baseline. That is exactly how Jesus is actively described from the very beginning of the texts, not just in one single apocalyptic vision at the end of the world. The gentle shepherd and the cosmic sovereign of the Ethiopian texts are supposed to be the exact same person, yet they feel like 2 entirely different beings. That massive, glaring gap is absolutely not an accident. It is the direct result of a calculated choice by powerful men who decided one specific version of Jesus was much more politically useful to them. When Mel Gibson was explicitly shown these side-by-side textual comparisons, the soft Renaissance portrait matched against the blinding Ethiopian cosmic descriptions, he reportedly sat in stunned silence. He said that the Western image suddenly felt exactly like a child's crayon drawing of a massive nuclear explosion, comfortable, familiar, and completely, hopelessly inadequate. Of all the erased texts the dedicated Ethiopian monks preserved on their mountains, absolutely none is considered more incredibly dangerous than the Book of Enoch. The reason it is considered so dangerous actually has absolutely nothing to do with what the text says. The danger lies entirely in exactly when it was written. 300 years before Jesus Christ was even born. Let the massive weight of that historical timeline sink in. This massive book, composed entire centuries before any of the events of the New Testament actually took place, describes in vivid, highly specific detail a divine figure known as the Son of Man or the Elect One. It vividly describes a massive heavenly court completely surrounded by rushing rivers of pure fire. It describes powerful angels falling to their knees in absolute terror before a massive figure made entirely of blinding light. It details a terrifying final cosmic judgment where every single living thing in the universe is precisely weighed and measured by a being of terrifying radiance. These are not vague, muddy prophecies. These are highly detailed, highly specific narrative scenes that are almost entirely identical to the apocalyptic visions found in the book of Revelation, written many hundreds of years later. When this cosmic figure finally speaks in the book of Enoch, the guilty immediately collapse in terror, and the righteous actively weep with sudden recognition. Modern scholars do not even seriously dispute this glaring textual connection. Dr. George Nicholsburg, a highly respected scholar at the University of Iowa who published what is considered the definitive academic commentary on 1st Enoch, stated the reality very plainly. He said that the cosmic imagery found in the book of Revelation did absolutely not just appear out of nowhere. It actively drew from a massive apocalyptic tradition that was already considered ancient. And the absolute deepest, most foundational root of that entire tradition is the book of Enoch. The glaring parallels between the two texts are absolutely not a coincidence. They are a direct literary inheritance. One ancient text passed its terrifying cosmic vision forward to the other across several centuries. But here is the massive, undeniable catch that exposes the entire political cover-up. During the early days of Christianity, the Book of Enoch was incredibly popular. It was widely read, constantly quoted, and heavily referenced by the earliest believers. In fact, the Epistle of Jude, a small book that is sitting inside your standard Western Bible right now, directly quotes from the Book of Enoch. It is not a loose paraphrase. It is a direct, undeniable, word-for-word quotation. Think about the sheer absurdity of that fact. An ancient book that was explicitly quoted as truth inside the official Bible was somehow declared not good enough to actually be included in the Bible. That decision has absolutely nothing to do with divine theology. That is pure, unadulterated human politics. The deeply suppressed content of Enoch goes far beyond simple prophecy. Enoch actively describes the complex architecture of the heavens in deeply technical terms that feel less like primitive mythology and much more like someone desperately trying to describe highly advanced physics without possessing the modern vocabulary for it. It describes the precise movements of massive celestial bodies with a level of mathematical precision that ancient people were simply not supposed to possess. It delves deeply into the actual nature of time, the ultimate cosmic origin of evil, and the physical, structural nature of reality itself. If this incredibly detailed, 300-year-old prediction of a terrifying cosmic Christ is factually accurate, the massive implications smash right through the boundaries of religion. It means that someone, thousands of years ago, had direct access to incredibly advanced knowledge about the true, underlying nature of reality that modern science is only now just beginning to approach. And the powerful men who deliberately removed this book from your Bible absolutely did not want you asking that massive question. Remarkably, the Book of Enoch isn't even the most mind-bending text preserved in the Ethiopian canon. The text that truly changes everything is a book known as the Ascension of Isaiah. This specific text completely rewrites how Jesus actually got here. It is not a vague prophecy or a list of moral laws. It is, in the absolute most literal sense imaginable, a highly detailed, step-by-step account of exactly how a cosmic being physically arrived on Earth. It completely ignores the traditional nativity story you know so well. It does not mention the humble wooden stable, the guiding star, or the simple shepherds. It describes something far stranger, far older, and far more deeply unsettling. The ancient text explicitly describes the Old Testament prophet Isaiah being taken on a massive cosmic journey completely through 7 distinct, separate levels of heaven. These are not meant to be metaphorical levels or symbolic stages of spiritual growth. They are described as 7 actual, physical, structural layers of reality, literally stacked directly on top of each other. Isaiah travels upward, and each successive layer is described as being significantly more luminous and exponentially more physically overwhelming than the last. Isaiah witnesses massive, impossible structures made entirely of pure light and physical sound that have absolutely no equivalent in normal human experience. He sees cosmic beings of such terrifying brightness that a normal, unprotected human being would be instantly destroyed by their sheer physical proximity alone. At every single ascending level, the absolute glory violently intensifies. The physical light actually gets heavier. The constant singing of the cosmic beings around him grows increasingly complex, heavily layered, and deeply overwhelming. Isaiah explicitly states that he physically felt his own human consciousness being violently stretched, as if his mortal mind was actively being expanded by force just to hold what his eyes were seeing. Finally, at the absolute highest level of the seventh heaven, completely beyond everything else in existence, he sees the Beloved. This is a figure of such unimaginable light and absolute cosmic power that simply using the human word God to describe it feels like a massive understatement. Every single cosmic being existing in every single heaven below it instantly bows in the direct direction of this overwhelming presence without ever even being told to do so. The reaction is completely involuntary, happening naturally, exactly like the absolute physical force of gravity. And then, this ultimate being begins to descend. What Isaiah describes next reads significantly less like an ancient religious scripture, and much more like a highly classified briefing on a covert operation that was never supposed to be made public. As this cosmic Christ begins moving downward, passing through each of the seven structural heavens, he deliberately and systematically sheds his own absolute radiance, layer by layer, dimension by dimension. He actively dims his own blinding glory. He does not do this because he is actually losing any of his cosmic power. He does it because the lower levels of reality simply cannot physically withstand his full, unfiltered presence. He is actively calibrating himself to the exact physical limitations of each dimension he passes through. By the time this cosmic sovereign finally reaches the lowest heavens, the angels existing there do not even recognize him. They look right at him, straight at the creator of their reality, and they see absolutely nothing special. The ultimate architect of the entire framework of existence is actively passing right through their domain, and they have absolutely no idea what is happening. By the time this massive being finally arrives on the physical earth, appearing as a tiny newborn infant in the town of Bethlehem, wrapped tightly in plain cloth and lying in dirty straw, the cosmic concealment is 100% total. A being of absolute infinite cosmic power has been deliberately compressed into the incredibly tiny, fragile body of a helpless human infant. The text states that the entire sky is literally holding its breath. The powerful angels in every single upper heaven are anxiously watching. The lower angels who completely fail to recognize him on his way down are now staring intensely at Earth, deeply confused, desperately wondering what in the universe just happened. And there, sitting in a filthy feeding trough in a tiny backwater town, the absolute architect of all known reality is crying out for milk. Forget Sunday school. This cosmic being descended through 7 dimensions, not to conquer the planet, but to wake humanity from a deep spiritual sleep. He came as a spark to remind us of what we actually are. When Mel Gibson heard this sweeping descent, he sat in silence before saying, "That's the story the world actually needs to hear." But the Ethiopian texts also preserve erased quotes that explain exactly why Rome buried this narrative. In the Book of the Covenant, Jesus explicitly calls his followers children of light. That single sentence detonates the entire foundation of organized religion. If every person carries a direct fragment of the divine, the entire apparatus, priests, popes, tithes, and massive cathedrals becomes completely unnecessary. You don't need an authorized mediator to connect with something already inside your own chest. In these texts, salvation isn't a legal transaction. It's an immediate personal awakening. The kingdom of heaven isn't a post-death destination. It's a state of consciousness accessible right now. You can see the civilization-shaping problem. If everyone is their own priest, institutional religion becomes obsolete overnight. When the Roman Empire standardized Christianity, its imperial mindset required total control. Any text suggesting direct, unmediated access to God was permanently eliminated, not as a theological error, but as a direct, existential threat to political power itself. So the massive purge began. Texts like Enoch, the Ascension of Isaiah, and the Book of the Covenant were ruthlessly eliminated by men in closed rooms. Anything suggesting direct divine access or a cosmic liberator was quietly removed to protect institutional power. The terrifying cosmic sovereign of blazing fire was actively reshaped into a gentle, manageable shepherd, a version of the story that perfectly served the financial and political needs of the church. But isolated Ethiopia remained completely beyond their reach. In stone monasteries carved into terrifying cliffsides, devout monks had one sacred job: hand copy the ancient texts exactly as they received them. They did this perfectly for 2,000 years. Remarkably, the very manuscripts they guarded predicted this exact future, warning that humanity would eventually create false, softened images of Christ and worship comfortable symbols instead of the terrifying living truth. Right now, in this very second, those reality-altering manuscripts still exist. They are locked away in cliffside monasteries, guarded by men who spend their entire lives waking before dawn to copy the ancient words by flickering candlelight. They don't do it for money. They do it because they know the world will eventually wake up and come looking for them. They preserved 81 books detailing a cosmic Jesus so radically different that Mel Gibson realized the Western Church had given him a Christ with the volume turned almost all the way down. Every single word, deliberately erased from your standard Bible, still exists perfectly in theirs, guarded by a monk sitting in the dark, preserving the cosmic truth you were never supposed to see.